Cheers, everyone. Dave Brown here with the New Populist. Thank you again for joining me. As you're probably aware, we have the NATO summit in Vilnius, Lithuania, wrapping up today. This two-day summit, and every time NATO gets together, they release a communique, which is a statement that is agreed upon by all the NATO parties concerning what NATO is focusing on right now, their concerns, their issues, and things they are going to focus on in the future. And this year, the communique they released was over had 80 different points to it, which is fairly long compared to the one they had back in 2022, which was, I think, around 30 different points or so. But I went through the communique and I highlighted the parts that I think are the most interesting, the parts that I think we need to pay attention to. So, to start, every time NATO gets together, they invite Japan, Australia, South Korea, New Zealand. So while these are non-NATO members, they are part of the West. So this sort of gives you an idea of what NATO is really about. It's about the West. NATO is the military alliance where we, the United States, have the most control. And of course, this year we have Zelensky here. Zelensky invited, and their 11th point says this about Ukraine, which I think is interesting. We fully support Ukraine's right to choose its own security arrangements. Ukraine's future is in NATO. We reaffirm the commitment we made at the 2008 summit in Bucharest that Ukraine will become a member of NATO. And today we recognize that Ukraine's path to full Euro Atlantic integration has moved beyond the need for the Membership Action Plan. Ukraine has become increasingly interoperable and politically integrated with the alliance and has made substantial progress on its reform path in line with the 1997 Charter on a distinctive partnership between NATO and Ukraine and the 2009 complement. Allies will continue to support and review Ukraine's progress on interoperability, as well as additional democratic and security sector reforms that are required. NATO foreign ministers will regularly assess progress through the adapted annual national program. The alliance will support Ukraine in making these reforms on its path toward future membership. We will be in a position to extend an invitation to Ukraine to join the alliance when allies agree and conditions are met. Now, you have to think about this. Ukraine right now is in this war now, 17 months. They've lost hundreds of thousands of men. Russia is firmly implanted in the Donbass with little prospect for them to be removed. And here we have this statement from NATO going, you guys, Ukraine, you're coming along. You're going to get there eventually. We're going to keep our promise we made back in 2008 that at some point you're going to be in NATO. But 2008 was, what is that now? 15 years ago? Still not in. They've done everything NATO has to ask, and they're still not let in. Of course, we know why, because if they were in, that starts World War III. But the point I've always made is that the point was never for Ukraine to join NATO. The point was for Ukraine to fight Russia on behalf of the geopolitical planners in the West. They are the crash dummy. They are the cannon fodder. And I think maybe old Zelensky is starting to realize this because he blasted NATO for their murky timeline for entering into NATO. And he should be irritated because we've been luring him along. And as much as I dislike Zelensky because he's an actor, you see him here at this conference wearing his traditional little garb here. I don't like that. You're a head of state, act like one. And again, when I see him wearing this stuff here, it's like he's acting. And and this picture really also signifies how NATO was treating him. He's the outcast. He's not part of the group. And maybe, just maybe, Zelensky is starting to realize that Ukraine is meant to be destroyed on behalf of the West. If and our goal again is to destroy Russia. That is the purpose, not for NATO to prosper and join Ukraine. If we were serious about that, we would have tried to integrate Ukraine earlier, but that was not part of the plan. So I really feel bad for the Ukrainians. They're being played by NATO. They are the suckers, unfortunately, and they're being destroyed for our cause. Believe me, the neocons living in Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia, in their $1 million homes, they can go on Twitter all they want and say, praise Ukraine, Slava Ukraine. And then they click off, and then they go on their back porch and they smoke their cigars and drink their expensive whiskey. Meanwhile, it's the Ukrainian men who are in a trench somewhere getting blown up. So I really feel bad for the Ukrainians. Next, we have this issue about Russia. Of course, this is all about Russia. But one thing I found funny here was the statement that, number 19 here, we seek stability and predictability in the Euro-Atlantic area and between NATO and Russia. NATO does not seek confrontation and poses no threat to Russia. And my question is, who are you kidding here? I mean, the entire purpose of NATO is to contain Russia, is to threaten Russia. Now, here's a distinction here maybe. The United States is really the actor that is being super aggressive against Russia starting back in, well, not just back in 2018, 2016, but ever since really Putin started becoming obvious to the West that he wasn't going to cooperate. We've been digging at Russia for the last 15 years. And I think the crescendo was really 2016, well, just now, but it really amped up in 2016 with the whole Russiagate stuff here in the United States that Russia was hacking our election, and that just triggered this avalanche of Russophobia. And it's weird just walking around the streets here in the United States. I can't imagine saying something positive about Russia in public, and you probably get a bunch of nasty looks. So it's really sad what the mainstream media and our government has done as far as vilifying other countries. But so the United States has this really aggressive posture toward Russia, sanctions and all this kind of thing. Meanwhile, it's saying here that NATO poses no threat to Russia because it's a defensive alliance. So we were playing this game. NATO is the defensive alliance, but NATO is controlled by the United States, and the United States would love to see Russia destroyed. So I find that comment that NATO is no threat to be kind of funny. Also here, point 7, they say, the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam highlights the brutal consequence of the war started by Russia. Notice the wording here. They don't say Russia destroying the dam is a horrible thing. They say the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam. And what this tells me is that they know Russia didn't do it. And this is a repeated thing that happens. Something bad happens, Russia's blamed, and then later it comes out that it wasn't Russia. The Nord Stream pipeline, that's one there. The missiles that hit Poland and killed the 2 Polish men, that's another one. The shelling of the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, they blame Russia, despite the fact that Russia occupied the plant, which made no sense. And then they blame Russia for this dam being destroyed. But here they say, again, the destruction of the dam, not that Russia did it. So I think this is an admission that perhaps Russia was not involved. Next, we have China. And this is something that has come up in previous communiques. This really aggressive stance toward China, NATO turning out toward the east. And right here it says, we will stand up for our shared values and the rules-based international order, including freedom of navigation. And I always talk about the rules-based international order that we demand the rest of the world follow, while we ourselves, well, we don't follow it. We say we do, but we break the rules of which aren't even clear in the first place. We break them anytime we want to. And then it says here, the 25th point, the deepening strategic partnership between the PRC and Russia and their mutually reinforcing attempts to undercut the rules-based international order run counter to our values and our interests. So this is where we're heading. We are heading toward perhaps some sort of new Cold War with Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and then Europe, the United States, Japan, South Korea, and India sort of straddling both sides, not wanting to pick sides for a lot of different reasons. So unfortunately, the more things change, the more things stay the same. The Cold War ended in 1991, and we really are ramping up a new Cold War. And the difference this time is, back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, the United States, we were a growing economy, and our debt situation was relatively under control, like around 50% of GDP. But in 1990, it was still around 50% debt to GDP. But now in 2022, it's ballooned. We owe over $30 trillion in debt here in the United States. Our economic position is not the same as it was back in the 90s or even the 60s. So if we have a new Cold War form, we aren't as strong as we once were. China has an economy of 16 trillion, tons of manufacturing. Russia has tons of resources, gas, oil, mineral, farmable lands. So that union, if they play it right, will be an absolute powerhouse that is a threat to the United States in the sense that it can rival us economically. And if that happens, and it's looking like it will happen, then we will have a setup for, again, a new Cold War, which will be bad news for everybody involved. And the question is, do we have people in Washington, Moscow, and Beijing who can work this out and prevent that from happening? Obviously, Putin, he's looking at things going, every time I try to talk, you guys give me the finger and walk away. China is saying, well, you guys do all this stupid crap. You shoot down our balloon. You calls you a dictator, and then you want to talk. Nah, we're not really happy with you, which is why we finally were able to send over our Treasury Secretary and Secretary of State to go there and try to work things out to mix results. And then you have the Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. never listens. They only talk and they only demand. And if they don't change that mindset, we're not going to get anything done. So we got a lot of stubborn people, a lot of, unfortunately, I have to say that the United States right now is the least realistic and the least willing to have talks that have mutual respect and treat every side like an equal partner. We have to do that at some point if we want to have successful negotiations to bring down the level of this rancor in the air. But I don't see that happening anytime soon. And the more we struggle in this proxy war against Ukraine, the more we see our position slip here in the United States. Unfortunately, the more we sort of lash out and go on the attack, on the offensive, and lash out against countries like China and Russia and North Korea and Iran. So if history is a lesson, we're going to have more turbulent times before times get better. And it's much more dangerous when you have all of these nuclear armed countries like Russia, China, and the United States. So we'll see what happens with this Ukraine war, how it ends. And I think that will really dictate, to a large extent, what the next move is for the United States as far as Taiwan and China. So interesting times. Well, that's it for now. If you are new to my channel, please please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.